You're listening to the Chrysalis Podcast. I'm your host, Chelsae Zirna. On this podcast, we will be sharing inspiring stories from best-selling authors, coaches, and leaders who aren't afraid of stepping into the unknown and exploring the greatest truths of life. This is your place to turn your breakdowns into your breakthroughs, to live in alignment with your purpose, and to gain the tools of personal mastery through emotional sovereignty. Thank you for being here. Welcome to the Chrysalis Podcast. I'm your host, Chelsae Zirna, and today I am sitting here with a dear sister, Amyann, and Amyann is an incredible pleasure coach. And she is going to be telling us a little bit of her story and how she got into what she's doing today. And she's also super knowledgeable on so many incredible things when it comes to the divine feminine, sacred sexuality, the queen codes. And in our Metamorphosis Chrysalis program, she is our master coach of the queen codes. So as we're diving in, yeah, Amyann, thank you so much for being here. It is so amazing having you on this podcast.
It's such a pleasure to be here, Chelsae, with you.
Yes, I'm so excited. And yeah, I'm really excited to dive into your story because it is so unique. And I know that you've told me bits and pieces here and there, but you have one of the most incredible stories of all time. And you've gone so deep into the work that you do. So I'm really looking forward to kind of diving in and talking with you. And so basically, as we're kind of moving into, we all start in kind of this caterpillar phase of life. And in the caterpillar phase of life, we're going through these big dark night of the soul moments. And usually when we have enough of these dark night of the soul moments, we have this realization that something needs to shift. And it usually catalyzes us into diving into the unknown and having this like chrysalis aha realization moment. And so I would love to kind of hear a little bit about your story and how you got to this moment in your life.
Yeah. Oof. There's just so much there. There's so much that I could share. So I'm just going to, even right now, just kind of breathe into my body and see what's most relevant and what feels true to this moment. So I was raised fundamentalist evangelical Christian on a farm. And my mother was really perpetuating patriarchal structures and the idea that truth and authority is outside of ourselves, outside of our bodies, and especially outside of the feminine. So that was my programming. And it was embedded in me to such an extent that as a teenager, as much as I loved reading fiction and fantasy novels, I actually didn't trust reading female authors. My focus was all on male authors because I literally did not trust women. And all of our leaders in church, they were all men, etc. And I finally brought myself to read some fiction and fantasy by women, and it really caused me to struggle with some stuff. And at the same time, I was aching for a connection with nature, and I kind of developed my own connection with nature growing up on a farm. And I felt that I connected with the soul in nature, or like a consciousness in the trees and the plants in the earth. But the worldview that I came from really didn't make room for that. And then I found, the Chronicles of Narnia. I think I was 12 years old, 11 years old when I found the Chronicles of Narnia. And C.S. Lewis writes about trees having personalities and souls, and the water, the river having a spirit, and animals being able to talk and all this stuff. And it was this interesting moment of that kind of pantheistic, animistic worldview coming together with Christianity, because I found out later that C.S. Lewis was Christian. And for the rest of my teen years and into my 20s, I was really trying to join those two worlds together. This feeling and this sense I had of all things being alive, all things being imbued with spirit, with source, and then my Christian worldview, which at a fundamental, or the fundamentalist perspective or branch of Christianity basically says that's not true. The only things that have spirit are humans and angels, God, etc. And the whole world is split into either Jesus and God or Satan. So even the thought that nature was alive or, had a personality, had a heart in some way, an energetic spirit, that could be seen as satanic. That was considered, paganism and wrong. So in my early 20s, I went to a Christian university, basically for fear that if I went to a secular university that I would lose my faith. I kind of had this bubbling feeling. And I wanted to kind of protect myself. And my mom was so happy I chose a Christian university. And even there, I started studying eco-critical literary theory and, studying thinkers who talked about the earth as living in Gaia theory and these types of things. And I studied feminist theorists on the Bible and on the books of the Bible. And that started really stirring things up for me. And I remember being in my university apartment one day and just like screaming to high heaven, feeling like I wanted to rip out my hair because I was so angry at the God of the Old Testament. And I just was like, if this is who God actually is, like, I can't follow you. This is not happening for me. And around that time, I started going to sit with this tree and like meditate with this tree on the Christian campus. And I had it was a very windy day. And this kind of the zephyr wind it was a warm wind kind of blowing my hair and spiraling around me. And I was given these visions of this spirit of the tree. It looked like a wizard-like being. And I was like, what? Like, no, I don't know. I'd never done plant medicine or anything like that before, but it just felt so real. And then that night I had a dream of walking in a really barren landscape. It was like a polluted, destroyed, blackened landscape, and nothing was alive there. And I was walking on this land, and I looked down and I was holding the hands of 2 children beside me. And every step we took, flowers started blossoming at our feet. And I woke up and knew that was a really important dream and that's like what I was here to do. So I left my undergrad a few months early, be on my computer anymore, couldn't be in the books anymore. And I just went and worked on, it was a Christian farm, but an organic farm. And I just needed to get my hands in the soil. I needed to work with the land. I needed to go back to earth cycles. And I was also connecting more with my menstrual cycles and my thinking of like, our blood can't be evil. It can't be wrong. It can't be refuse when it's actually what produces a baby, what feeds a baby within us. So just all these little pieces were coming up for me. And then I was married at 21 and I had a very difficult time in that marriage, feeling like I was satisfied in any way. And our sex life was horrible. He had premature ejaculation, which I didn't know existed. Women are like a boiling pot. We need a lot of time to warm up and feel pleasure. And with his issues and the guilt and the shame gripping us around our sexuality, it was like we were 2 cold, dead fish coming together. And I just had so much pain in anything to do with sex and numbness. And so as part of trying to heal that relationship, I found this book on slow sex. And I now think that was like a tantric, I think the person who wrote it had some tantric background, but I didn't know what that was at the time. I also found the Kama Sutra, started just like looking at that. I found this book called Earth Prayers, and I brought some of these books on a camping trip with my then husband, and I left them out on the picnic table at nighttime under a full moon. And the moonlight, I guess, was shining so brightly that night. My husband's father got woken up and he came outside and he saw a moonbeam like shining on my books. And he went and he looked at them, especially this Earth Prayers book, and this other book, Dance of the Dissident Daughter, which was about a woman who was raised Christian, evangelical, and she left the church trying to find the goddess and went on this whole pilgrimage trying to find feminine-based spirituality. And he, I guess, looked at these books in the moonlight and was convicted by the Holy Spirit that they are evil and they're of the devil. And he told my partner, my husband, the next morning that he's convicted that those books need to be burned and like in the campfire. And when I heard this, like something snapped in me, literally like And I went out into the woods and started like releasing and screaming and punching the earth and like kicking the earth and screaming into the earth and just like sobbing, hyperventilating. And it was a feeling of, it felt like he wanted to burn me. Like that was the feeling. And I didn't believe in parallel or past lifetimes at the time, but it just felt so much bigger than this moment and these books. And it was like bringing in some remembrance of other things that I had denied were possible. So yeah, it was shortly after that I started getting messages from these beings called the grandmothers, and like speaking to them in the mirror and feeling their presence. And like they literally really helped me find the strength to pick up and leave. Like I left not only my husband, and that's like the most forbidden thing in this type of Christianity, but I left the church as well and left that community, and I moved to a whole other city and started a new life. And at that time I decided to go and study a master's in environmental studies, and specifically in indigenous based education models, earth-based education, place-based education. And yeah, that was my first really big like crumbling of everything that I knew before. And it was the scariest thing like I've ever done. And the doubt that was in me, like could this be the right thing? And like everything I had been raised to believe is that this is the wrong path. This is the path that's going to lead you to hell, to eternal damnation and eternal separation. And to have people from the church they wrote letters to me, and they wrote letters to like my family and said stuff like, I'm a witch, like I'm being possessed, or I'm being influenced by these negative forces. And I also had fallen in love with someone else, and that was like a whole adultery, like as a whole other level of things. And he was, yeah. So it was really, really hard to feel that people who I believe loved me and they were my community, they were my whole world. And then it felt like they were rejecting me, and they were rejecting my choices. And it felt like going through the fires of hell, and really I questioned, is this the right thing? And am I safe? But my deep inner intuition and knowing just kept driving me forward, even though everything else around me was telling me this was the wrong way to go. Like all these signs were like, danger, danger, like going off a cliff, like, no, no, no. And I just went for it, and had a lot of people not talk to me ever again or say really horrible things about me. My family didn't speak to me for a while, and I was the black sheep, So that was my first one. And since then, I've gone through a few other big upheavals in my life, and these dark nights of the soul of really questioning, oh my God, am I on the right path? And are you sure this is where we're going right now? And everyone else around me rejecting it or seeing me in this evil light. And it's happened a few times. And I feel it's part of my soul calling, or my lot in life, is to face these things and to go through these gauntlets and rebirth myself as something totally new.
Oh my gosh, Amyann, wow. That is so profound. Yeah. And it's also really common, I think, for people to be called a witch, especially in the Catholic Church, the Christian Church in general, and to be demonized, especially even for emotional release. Like there's people who have so many emotions, and it's almost like screaming and expressing these emotions and doing an emotional release, even in the earth, even in a pillow. It's so important to release anger, and it's so important to allow and know that these emotions are safe and they're not demonic, they're not evil. And there's so much conditioning in the church that you're possessed, you're evil, there's a spirit taking over you that that needs to be excavated or something. And it makes it really, really hard for people to be able to awaken to what's actually true. And I'm so curious how, maybe it was through books, but I'm curious how you actually were able to allow yourself to go to these places and explore some of these concepts, especially with so much conditioning around the church. Like this is something that you were raised in. You even went to college and chose that church based on wanting to stick with your faith. And then kind of going through this exploration and maybe taking these courses and starting to kind of read more about the divine feminine and the goddess, like what was it that even opened your mind up to being like, there's something more out there?
Are you asking like what freed my mind up to
Yeah.
something more out there? Okay. Well, yeah, it was a lot of things, I would say, and it was like almost breadcrumbs from my soul, that I was following like in a fairy tale. And I had been getting them since I was little. And it was like every time I found one of them, it was like a deep remembrance. But then the worldview would, come back on, and these other voices would try to like choke it out. But it kept something alive inside me. And each time I found one of these pieces, it would light it up again. So, even finding information on my first computer in the house, finding information about astrology on this like we didn't even have the internet, anything. It was this encyclopedia that was built into the computer system, and it talked about the different zodiac signs. And I was just like obsessed with reading about it and looking at the symbolism. And it was the symbols, these esoteric symbols and I like printed them on our printer and made this little book and took it to school. And my mom was like, oh, no. Like, how did you get a hold of that kind of thing? It was that type of stuff. Even, oh goodness, the grandmother Willow in Disney's Pocahontas, this feminine grandmother spirit singing to Pocahontas, listen with your heart and you will understand. When I was 8 and 9 years old watching that, something was really waking up in me from that. And I was like, I don't know if I was getting what we called in the Christian church God bumps, like goosebumps, and a recognition of truth in my being. I was like, I'm not supposed to feel truth from something like that. And like, I'm like a feminine spiritual figure, like, feminine goddess figure. I couldn't even say the word goddess. Like that was a forbidden term in our house. Anything to do with witches was forbidden. But I just kept finding these pieces, or these pieces kept finding me, and I just recognized them. And finally, I couldn't shut it off anymore. Like I had kept trying to do this weaving and this yoking together of these different worldviews, but it just got so uncomfortable. And it's like I just had to burn it all down. And yeah, that book, Dance of the Dissident Daughter and Earth Prayers, they were really a big part of it, but also going and being with the earth, like getting out of academia, and which was so disembodied, and actually finally feeling the soil and growing plants and working with horses, working with animals. And I met someone at this farm the first summer I worked there who, when we first looked in each other's eyes, I started having past life memories. And that freaked the fuck out of me because I wasn't allowed to believe that. And, these type things, it's just like I couldn't stop the awakening or slow down the awakening. And I just kept following the breadcrumbs until, yeah, as I said, actually had a vision during that time. I was really struggling with whether to leave my husband. I had this picture of a sleeping dragon. It felt like there was a dragon that had been buried in the earth in this big hill, layer upon layer of earth on it. And it's like the dragon was no longer asleep, and the weight of the earth and the rocks over top of it could no longer hold it in the earth anymore. And it was like cracking out of itself and cracking out of the earth, and its wings were opening. And then when I finally left, it was like I felt and saw a vision of this dragon just like breaking free of the earth and just like literally burning with its breath my life. It burnt my life apart. And now I know from the work that I do in these tantric lineages, in this priestess work, womb priestessing, like that is my womb. That's my womb dragon. That's this archetype, this essence of the divine feminine and the divine creatress of all life. So, yeah.
I love that. And in the Sophia code, the golden dragon is like the symbol of this like awakening of the goddess and the divine feminine, and having this realization of all of this past memory coming through. So that's so amazing that you're so visual and you have such a deep connection to your sixth sense. Like you have such this extra perception and this almost like clairvoyance in a sense, which is so cool. So after you kind of went through this reclamation and kind of like shifting away from the Catholic Church, how did sexuality play a role? Like what happened after you got divorced, and how did you kind of like shift your life into doing kind of what you're doing right now?
Yeah. So to rephrase, or let me speak what I'm hearing, how did I shift my life from being in the Christian church through sexuality to what I'm doing now? Or how did I awaken my sexuality, I guess?
Yeah. How did you shift from the Catholic Church, and how did you realize that sexuality was actually like your purpose and your dharma in this world?
Yes. Well, it's funny how our pain becomes our pleasure. Actually, that's a good way to put it too. But our pain becomes our purpose, and can also be our greatest pleasure as well. I've also heard it said, that our greatest wounds become our superpowers. Our greatest shame can become our superpower. So part of this, I'm going to go back in time a little bit and tell you that I did not touch myself sexually. I did not masturbate until I was 18 years old. And when I did, I started having an orgasm. Didn't even know really what an orgasm was. I didn't know anything. And even though we had sex ed, but it still was all like very up in the mind. And I started pulsing and feeling all this pleasure, and then had a vision of a horned god, this male figure with horns. And of course, at the time, I think that's the devil. And so my orgasmic response, it's like it was about to explode. It started exploding. And then because of that, it was like an implosion. All of that energy just like sucked back in, like a nuclear cloud coming back in on itself. And then it got sucked back up into my body. And it hid away. I was not able to access that pleasure or orgasm again for 7 years. And I only began to orgasm after I left my marriage. And yes, my husband was my first sexual partner. It was the first kiss that I ever had. I waited until I was 20 to kiss someone, and then also felt like this impulse, or no, more so an obligation to marry him, because he was the first person I kissed, and it was supposed to be such a sacred thing. And I had already had this guilt around, wow, I had touched myself and penetrated myself before my husband did, which is, I thought that was evil too. So when I left that marriage and the church, I began trying to explore myself again. And I was able to access more pleasure, but still not orgasm. And what unlocked it for me was I found Betty Dodson online. She's this elder sex witch kind of woman, but pretty mainstream. And she's all about vibrators. She's all about the, Hitachi magic wand, and just, girls, if you're struggling with vibrating, like with orgasming, this is going to override all of your shit, And so I ordered my Hitachi magic wand. This like a personal massager. A lot of women use it for orgasm, and plugged it in, and then was looking out the window at nature and like letting this thing go on my clit. And I started just having such an overwhelming sensation of the birds and the bees and the the flowers and the trees. Like how flowers were like the sexual organs, the pussy parts of trees and of nature, and they're calling in the bees, and I just had this very strong idea and felt sense of my whole body that all of nature is sexual, and that sexuality is holy and normal and pure, and then I let myself go and finally could orgasm again. And it was through nature and through vibrators that I reestablished these orgasmic passageways in myself. And shortly after, the man that I fell in love with when I was still married, he also left the church, and we started exploring these things together, and we started having spontaneous altered states of consciousness through our sexual energy sharing. And also, even the first time we had a deep hug, we had an explosion in our hearts, and it was a heart orgasm. And I'd heard that was possible before and longed for it. And then finally I had experienced it. And then, when we got more sexual after I left my husband, things just started popping off. All of these awakenings were happening. And I hadn't smoked weed in my life up to that point. I started experimenting with weed, all these very evil, forbidden things, all these things that my mom had put away on a shelf and labeled evil, of the devil, will wreck your life. I started one by one, like taking them off the shelf. Let's sample this one. Like, you sure, Mom? So he and I, so we started smoking some weed and then getting sexual, and then things just even opened up even more, and like energetic healing gifts kind of started coming on board, and we looked into what was happening with us and really found Tantra that way. And I went to my first Tantra workshop 13 years ago with this woman, Monique Darling, in Toronto. She was visiting from San Diego. And yeah, it just blew open everything that I thought was possible. And she showed us you can penetrate someone with your heart cock, and you can have orgasms in every chakra. And she like sat behind me and was like making love to me through with her heart cock. This was like so beyond of what I had known before. And I actually had a vision, a flash vision in that workshop that I would be in my 30s a Tantra teacher and facilitating these arts. And at the time, it kind of freaked me out, but it also felt very, very true. And I had a vision of a couple other things that also became true. Yeah, so it was a long road to healing, honestly. Even after, it actually took me 7 years of pleasuring myself with a vibrator. I could orgasm it was only 5 times, I believe, without a vibrator in seven years. With just sex alone, or like really deep in the heart space, like a clitoral or vaginal orgasm is what I'm talking about. And it was really as I started learning about more sacred sexuality, as I started working with nature more and doing more embodiment work and just waking up to more of these things and starting to do tantric initiations. I also found someone who, he and I, very twin flame type energy. He was very dark, masculine, and he just unlocked a lot in me. And he actually taught my body that it can orgasm without a vibrator. And at the time, I really projected onto him that he was kind of the savior of me that way. Even unconsciously, I really felt he was it. Like, oh my God, he just opened me up to all these new worlds. And part of my healing and remembering was that actually he just revealed to me what was already my own and potential within me. And he helped me unlock myself. And around that same time, I had a womb awakening, and then a Kundalini awakening, and all these other gifts and abilities and spiritual remembrances came on board. And then I started I was training in some different modalities. Had done Reiki level 1 and 2, had done some body talk training, and it's a really beautiful mind-body modality, somatic modality. And I was been a teacher for a few years. I had been a holistic
school teacher.
Yeah, first I was an outdoor education teacher, and then I went and got another degree and another couple teaching degrees and became a Waldorf teacher. And so I was teaching in this holistic education system. And yeah, wait, what was I just saying?
I'm curious about this womb awakening and this Kundalini awakening, and you were talking about the different trainings that you were doing and becoming a teacher. I'm actually really curious to kind of go deeper into the womb awakening and the Kundalini awakening, because those are two really huge things that happen in someone's life, and I'm obviously on the path to becoming a teacher. And yeah, I would love to kind of touch on that for a minute.
For sure. It's connected to what I was about to say with the teaching. So yeah, I had all these things come on board, and then I started seeing clients after school. After the school day was done, I was taking clients, and it only lasted a few months before everything exploded in my life. Like, almost worse in a way than when I left the church was this horrendous traumatic experience that happened with my class. And I'd had my class for 5 years. It was the 5th year I'd had in Waldorf. The teacher goes up through the grades. I was a middle school teacher. I had them from grade 5, I guess 4 years, up to grade 8. And I had been their helper or whatever in younger years. So what happened is this new kid came into the class, and he was there for a year, and he was German, which is actually my ancestry. A lot of my ancestry is German as well. He came from Germany. And he was like the star student and all of these things. And he was interested in Tantra, actually. And he had said that his grade 7 teachers back in Germany had introduced sacred sexuality and Tantra to the students in their sex ed. And so I also, because I brought it into our sex ed, I was like, tried to bring some sacred sexuality into our sex ed classes. And so he ordered Osho books and was reading Osho in German and all these things. And I think some of the boys in the class were weirded out by it, or weirded out by our connection, which was so pure and so of the heart. but also I had some like energetic boundary issues myself and oversharing. Like I overshared my life with these kids often. And they also saw right through me. I couldn't even hide shit from them. And I was exploring all these things and doing trainings in Tantra and sacred sexuality and having all these expansive sexual experiences with people. And I was polyamorous at the time, all this stuff. And I think they could feel the energy. I think. And anyway, regardless, this kid ended up making up a story that I sexually assaulted him, that I kissed him and touched him over his clothes. And I had to, our school a few years before, just when I had started teaching there, had a gym teacher who actually was having affairs with students and who actually, fully sexually abused a couple of students. And that all came to the light and he got arrested and put in prison. And our school went through a very deep kind of lockdown process and training process around predators and predatorial behavior and all the things. And so we had all these protocols in place. And as soon as this kid and the other popular boys in the class like were with him and they all went to tell a guidance teacher together this story. And anyway, and so as soon as this came out, I had to leave that day, like with whatever I could carry and go under investigation. And it was another witch hunt. Like I literally, so nuts. Yeah.
Wow, that is so intense.
Yeah. And it really was I know it was part of my Kundalini awakening. And, when my Kundalini, it was part of a Tantra initiation that I was in, into this certain lineage. And at the end of the training, it was the beginning of the training, I'd actually heard, like, I'm going to have a Kundalini awakening. And it's something I wanted for years. I had practiced Kundalini yoga for years and I'd been wanting it and never experienced it. Just had like little bits of energy, these experiences. And then heard this voice in my head and then pushed it aside. And it was the very last day of the training and we were doing our closing circle and our closing energy practice. And all of a sudden this energy started shooting up from my pussy and my yoni, and it like was coming up into my heart, and I started having like an orgasmic feeling through my entire being. And at this point, I'd never had a full body orgasm without, first it was vibrator, and then it was with this lover who unlocked me, but never without touch, And I started having this feeling as if I was being touched or as if I had a vibrator on me. And instead of shutting it down, which is what one voice in my head said to do, I'm there with 20 people, 20 other people and the instructors. And I'm just like, I'm going to let this happen. And I just letting this rip roaring orgasm through me and sounding out these orgasmic sounds. We were doing this group thing all in a circle and I just went off in full ecstasy. And after I came down from that, it's like I couldn't actually fully come down. My body was still vibrating in this orgasmic state. And some other women in the program were like, oh my God, I'm so glad you let that happen. Like I could feel it in me too, but I shut it down. I was too scared. And they're like, that's an inspiration. I think I was so triggered from people, but I was in my truth. And then my teacher, she said to me, it looks like you're having a Shakti Kundalini awakening, and you can, now that she started to move in you this way, it's going to continue on her own timing. So you could go and ground, go be in nature, go have lunch, and then come back, or then, go home, or you can go lay down on that yoga mat and let the waves take over you. And there was no question. I've been waiting for this for years since I first heard of Kundalini. I went and laid down on the mat, and as soon as my back hit the mat, I just was going wave after wave of convulsion, tears and laughter and crying and like uncontrollable shaking through my entire being. And it lasted for over an hour. And during this time, I felt the energy spinning and spiraling open my different energy centers, my chakras, and pulling out debris, like bringing to the surface a lot of shit. And some of the shit that came to the surface felt like it was to do with my class. And this was a few months before all that shit went down. So it was like I had these karmic relationships with these kids, and we'd play these different roles for each other in different lifetimes, and we were unwinding a whole bunch of karma. And I was releasing so much pain and like screaming and then a few months later, this all went down. Yeah, it's very interesting.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. That is a really powerful story, and I resonate with that. And I feel like a lot of people, when they're in that situation, they do shut down their Kundalini energy because there's a lot of shame that comes up when we're in full expression, when we're screaming, when we're crying, because sometimes that energy can, like, I think subconsciously we know this is so powerful that it could literally take over, and I am about to scream or yell or whatever. And that can create a lot of shame, and it can create a lot of just desire to just repress and shut down. And it's amazing that you were able to be like, actually, I'm just going to let this happen and trust yourself that you're like, okay, this is what I've been waiting for years. And then you literally let it take over your entire body for an hour, obviously, after everyone left. And I think that's also like a key is finding places where you can feel safe. It's like you had this beautiful opportunity, like in this circle of people, and then like it picked right back up. Like when you laid down, and it took like an hour to move through, and all the trauma and all the things were getting pushed out of your channel and out of your body. And yeah, usually after that, it takes like a long time to ground and even come back into society. Like there's just a process of integration, and even like touching technology, you're so, I mean, for me, it was like, I felt like electric. And so I would get shocked when I would touch certain things. Like I couldn't hold a microphone for a while without a napkin because I would get shocks in my body. And yeah, I'm curious what that process like was like for you, like coming back from that and actually like integrating back into the world. Because, you know, even to take it even further, some people just need to be alone for a while and just totally kind of go into like a cave for a little bit because they get so extra sensitive.
I believe I had to work the next day.
Yeah.
So I don't remember. No, wait, maybe not the next day or 2 days later or something.
Yeah, you had to go right back.
But the very next day, I do know that I had a call with my mentor, one of my mentors and spiritual teachers. And I got on the call with them. They're them, they them, and started telling them what had happened. I barely could even start telling them. They could feel the energy immediately. And as I'm starting to talk about what had just happened, I look at my altar and I have a picture of Babaji Nagaraj on the altar, and that's the guru of this lineage of Tantra. And he's the king of snakes or serpents in India, an ascended master. And all of a sudden, I feel this energy start to climb from my chest and my throat up into my third eye. And it starts, I feel this spinning in my third eye, literally a spinning. And just to go back briefly, when I was convulsing the day before, the teacher came up to me and she said, Amyann, you have to unlock your jaw because the energy wants to move up into your higher centers and you're stopping it, you're locking it in. And I was like, I hear what you're saying, but like, I can't. I can't go. My whole rest of my body was so free, but I just couldn't let it in here. And then the next day in the calm of my bedroom, my trusted teacher on the phone, I guess I relaxed enough to let her up. And she's, and this picture on my altar, his face literally changed. I can't describe to you how insane. I'm sure some people listening to this have had really wacky spiritual experiences. You know, most of my visions are internal and they're very imaginal in my imagination. I've had an active imagination my whole life. This was with eyes fully open. My physical eyes saw this painting, this picture become someone else. His face morphed into Jesus, and then it morphed Mary Magdalene. And then it morphed into my mother. And then it morphed into my father. And then I was no longer seeing the 3D. And I started seeing all kinds of things that I wish I could remember now. But it was very ancient stuff, multiple lifetimes, shit I had done, shit I did to my teacher. And one of the lifetimes, what appeared to be real was that I was the father of both this mentor on the phone with me and this lover who helped unlock my Kundalini. And I had horrible things to these children in the Middle Ages. It's like I was witnessing these acts and it was sexual abuse. And I was like, holy hell, like, is this me? Is this someone? What am I seeing? Like, and then I saw all these beautiful timelines and beautiful relationships and all this stuff. And like, all the karmic threads that wind us and bind us to all these other beings who are all part of us in one way or another. And that lasted for also, I think, about an hour. And it was as if I was on ayahuasca or some really high level DMT plant medicine. And I've never had visions like that since. That was my one time I had full on like eyes open with no plant medicine, that level. And then to ground and integrate that, I mean, that was a lot of energy that I needed to ground and integrate. And I also wonder, even now talking about it, it's like seeing that sexual abuse timeline, whether or not that was me in another form, or if I'm seeing, you know, it's hard for me sometimes to know, did we actually live these lifetimes, or as source, we just live everything all at once? And so then we tap into these different energetic threads if we start seeing other timelines. But then it's like, if that was true and part of my soul did that, then I wonder, this false accusation with the kids, it's like, there's just so many levels of things. And I do think that my energy was so high afterwards. It was not like, it wasn't in alignment with that school anymore. It wasn't in alignment with those children and their behavior or whatever. It just, I needed to actually, everything needed to shut down. And like you said, like go into quiet. And it was like a forced going into the cave after. It's like I had to put my job on hold. I couldn't and then all of a sudden I could be at home and be with myself and do practices and be calm and then take clients like on my time and my terms. And that just created this almost, like a cave experience of being able to integrate all this massive energy and remembrance.
Oh my God. Wow. That is so amazing. And I love the way that you put that. Yeah. And, you know, part of what we believe, or part of what we've designed with the Chrysalis, is after this, like these, like, let's say these were like dark night of the soul moments. It's almost like you literally go into this chrysalis, which is your cave, and you literally break down and purge all of these old beliefs and all these old systems, and removing all of these layers. And now that the job is gone, who am I? And it's almost like this reshifting of your identity completely in order to re-emerge into the world as who you actually are. And it's almost like you have like one life as this like creepy, like crawly creature walking on the ground, and then this other life, and you're literally having these superpowers. You're able to fly. You're literally able to like see from this bird's eye view. And it's almost like you emerged out of that space, literally fully embodied as, and you were kind of already teaching Tantra, before you left even the school, right?
I wasn't teaching Tantra, but I was taking clients doing energy work. And it was doing, first I started with body talk, that modality in Reiki. And then shortly after, I think it was within a month of me doing that with clients, my womb basically just took over. And she said to me, you know, this is not what you're doing with your clients. Mm-hmm. She showed me this other way of doing things. And my Kundalini was just like doing things with people and like helping them move their shit and all this stuff. And then I was doing more, bringing more tantric practices into it. And then my practice evolved and I started remembering priestessing and what that for people. And yeah, that's what I've been doing ever since. And my practice has evolved and changed itself. And yeah, it's become much deeper than it was then. But even then, I wasn't trained in priestessing when I started taking these clients and doing energy work. It just started coming on board, and I was given visions and downloads of like how to do certain things. And then I found priestess mentors and started learning from them, shamanic people to work with, and other actual specific longer tantra trainings and all these other things.
That is so incredible. What would you say is the thing that you love helping people with the most? Like, let's say, I know you've done all of these trainings and you have such a connection to the Magdalene lineage and the Temple of the Rose and all of these different lineages, which is so unique. Like, you've studied through so many different teachers. I'm curious, like, what your highest desire is for what you want to keep studying, and then also what you really love teaching. Like, what is like your favorite thing that you love teaching?
Babe, I'm literally asking myself this again right now. The last couple weeks of like real deep soul searching and questioning this myself. So what do I want to keep studying and what do I want to keep teaching? I'm feeling very lit up right now by the Tao lineage of Tantra. Wishman Takachia as the Grand Master teaches. There's a woman, Meka DeVos, that I really want to study from. I was thinking of going to her this summer, but it didn't work out. The Tao lineage has come through some different teachers I've worked with, and it's also kind of just pops in, like certain revelations pop in, and I'm like, what is okay? And then I find out that lineage teaches it. So that one in particular, and traditional Chinese medicine is really sparking me lately. The acupressure points, the meridians, that theory of the spirit body and the elements and how we work with that in the body, I'm starting to get more and more excited about, which is interesting because it was like not interesting for me for a while, and I was really wanting more of the Western mysteries, like the Magdalene Yeshua version of sacred sexuality, but it's also connected. So that's really sparking me right now. And what am I most excited about teaching? In the last few months, it was really focused on men and men's sexual awakening as their sexual awakening. Their true sexual awakening is the key to their spiritual awakening. And I've loved working one-on-one with men and in lately group containers with men, teaching men these sexual sublimation and transmutation practices, sexual mastery practices, and just like witnessing their coming home to themselves has been so rewarding. But lately, again, my womb has just been, I'm going to cry actually again. I have such a time with my womb. Like when Kundalini awoke and then my womb had awoken, and she would wake me up in the night with orgasm after orgasm, or she'd be like a furnace burning away all this old shit, or like gestating new things that she wanted to gestate and show me. And she would give me visions and like show me her character and her personality and tell me her name, like all this stuff, and it's now it's a little bit more 3D and integrated, and I don't have as many loud interactions with her. It's very subtle. And I also can find myself being busy with other things and forgetting to really connect with her. So last week, I was woken up again for the first time in a very long while. We were doing some crazy magic, and I was in some ether realms, and like the Sophia dragon that is my womb was doing some really big shit for me in the higher realms, and I was like fully at one with my soul family and my purpose, and like, just really in heaven. I was in heaven, and it's my favorite place to be in that union. And then I woke up with like this crazy burst like through the center of my womb that just became an orgasm through my whole body. And I was just so grateful to my womb for like being the portal to those realms. And and it reminded me how much I'm obsessed with womb work and womb awakening and womb healing, and helping women remember that their womb is so much more than a place to hold a baby or to be upset about when it bleeds or cramps. It's literally like, it is the creatrix of all life. When she remembers herself, there is no separation between her and the divine feminine essence that literally births all universes into being and collapses them again. And it's the quantum field of all potentiality. And it's just beyond, it is the temple. It is the temple of everything we desire and everything we long for. And it's the place of death and rebirth. It is the chrysalis. Lovers can literally be taken into our womb field and have the ego death experience and be reborn when our wombs are awoken. With our wombs, we can priestess people into the remembrance of their true selves. And it's just, so I'm feeling really excited to actually host a course called The Awakened Womb in the looks like September right now. And help more women remember this. Yeah.
Oh my God, Amyann, this is so amazing. And it's so amazing how deeply connected, like stepping into our sovereignty and our queen-like state. I know you do a lot of like queen making and king making, and how deeply connected that is to our womb and our sexuality, and how we literally are liberated in our body and our expression and everything through our sexual energy. And when we repress that, we literally repress a huge part of ourselves from actually feeling free in the world and actually feeling safe to be ourselves. And it's almost like creates this deep, deep, deep level of trust in ourselves, which is the key to accessing our power. And it's the key to being able to surrender. And so it's almost like you're really helping people develop and cultivate this deep level of trust and surrender in themselves, so that they can really step into their inner king and their inner queen and live in this state which you embody so well. this beautiful, like divine royalty, this divine feminine, beautiful essence. And that's definitely why, we love having you inside of, especially inside of Metamorphosis, and embodying the codes of the inner queen and being in that beautiful state of sovereignty and just connection to this infinite creation and literally your higher self. There's such a powerful connection point there. And I'm also curious if women want to go deeper into kind of like doing this womb work, how can they best reach you and find you and work with you? And what do they need in order to work with you? Like some of the stuff you're doing is really advanced. And then obviously there's other things that people can just jump into. So what does that kind of look like?
Yeah, for sure. So they can find me at amyann.arts, both as my website and my Instagram handle is amyann.art. And what does it look like for women to work with me? Well, yeah, for the last couple of years, I've been focused on these one-on-one VIP programs called King Making and Queen Making. And I teach people the foundations of sacred sexuality and neo-tantra, and I use these somatic embodiment coaching methods to help people really clear all the layers that are blocking them from finding their true self or living their highest potential and greatest possibility in their life, and also blocking them from their fullest expression. So yeah, and it's all about taking back your sovereignty from all of these places that you might not even be aware that you've given your power away, hence queen of your realm. And as part of the queen making, we do a lot of work with womb awakening and coming back to the natural cycles of our bodies, our hormonal cycles, connected to moon cycles, connected to earth cycles. And we work with those cycles to, at certain times it's more aligned to be doing womb clearing work or yoni egg yoga, to be pulling out the debris, purifying, and then also building that purified sexual energy towards your manifestations, which you do around your ovulation. And there's different practices for different times of the month, your cycle. I teach yoni steaming and self-breast massage and abdominal massage and breath work for connecting to yourself and clearing your debris. And then also working with your menstrual blood, your moon blood, and how to really honor that and cherish that and help it remember itself as liquid light and liquid love, which, in many ancient Tantric traditions, menstrual blood is one of the highest nectars of the gods in the 3D that can grant us enlightenment, actually, and the remembrance of our true selves. So really learning how to honor that and work with that again. And so these are some of the foundational practices in queen making, and there's more to it. And there's initiations and plant medicine ceremony initiation and all the different things and polarity play. But the foundations of it, which is connecting with these moon cycles, womb cycles, is going to be in this Awakened Womb course. So if you can't afford to work with me in the VIP level of queen making, you can get the codes at the level that you're ready for in Awakened Womb in a group container, and we can all grow and awaken and become more of ourselves together and queen make ourselves together. I don't queen make people. They queen make themselves. I hold the space, But yeah, I get to embody a fractal of my client's consciousness, and I get to play these archetypes for them. And it is beautiful in person to be able to put a crown on someone, to do these throne rituals, to be able to do foot washing and foot like oil anointing, these ancient arts on someone, and body work, etc. But I do teach the codes of this in the Awakened Womb. So that's the first place you can start.
Amazing. Oh my gosh, Amyann. Thank you so much for sharing your story and being so vulnerable and taking us through this almost like very descriptive, almost like you're actually there with you as you're speaking. It's so beautiful. I love how deep you go in your explanations and the way that you kind of describe things. It's so amazing. And for everybody who, obviously, if you want to work directly with Amyann and you want to go into more of your wisdom in your womb, reach out to Amyann on Instagram. Amyann's also obviously one of the teachers in our Metamorphosis program. and she is the master coach for the inner queen. So she's going to be bringing some of these queen codes into our program for the rest of the year. So we're opening another cohort this summer, and then we're opening another one in the fall. So if you've been hearing about metamorphosis and you're curious and you're like, what is this program? There's 20 different coaches in here, and they're all people that I know, and they're all people that I love. Like, what is this? How can I learn? Or if you're in this place of kind of like awakening different parts of yourself and you want to go deeper into your own spirituality and learn different ways of emotional mastery and stepping into sovereignty, then this program is definitely for you. And we have some incredible people. Obviously, a lot of them are on this podcast. And you can check out the other episodes, subscribe to this podcast, follow Amyann on Instagram, and you can find the Chrysalis on Instagram. Amyann, thank you so much for being here and for doing this podcast. You're such a dear sister to me, such an inspiration. I've learned literally so much from you. Obviously, we lived together for a long time in Tulum, and you are so embodied in what you do. And I really appreciate you for who you are and how expressive you are and how deep you are. Just thank you for showing up the way that you show up in this world.
It's such an honor to know you, Chelsea, to be part of this and to be part of your empire, your fempire. I call Chelsea Empress. She's my sister. Yeah, and yeah, you're so dear to my heart. And this program is just such big magic. I'm so excited for the people that are coming into Chrysalis and doing the work of transformation and being supported by all these master coaches and overseen by Empress Chelsea. The thing about the Empress piece is it like other people can be Empress too. She's not the only one, but Chelsea really embodies these codes and with such humility and such a heart. And I just love you so much. Thank you.
I love you so much. Thank you guys. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And if you love this podcast, go ahead and give it a review. We'd love to hear from you guys.